Well, just looking at the previous film gave me some very bad memories, because in fact what you saw, I was a participant in all that bloodletting. In 1986, the International Whaling Commission issued a worldwide ban on the hunting of whales, the only exception being the minke whale. 37 years earlier, along with many other whalers, I too had been complicit in the killing and processing of almost 6,000 whales in the 3-year period between 1949 and 1952. In an act of contrition and shame, and thanks to the persuasion of my daughters, I offered myself to Greenpeace as an anti-whale hunt campaigner in the hope that this would, in some small way, expiate some of the guilt I had harboured over the preceding years, and guilt also at what I'm about to read you in this first-hand account, detailing the chase and killing of a blue whale seen from the deck of a catcher. But first let me take you back to 1949. As a 16-year-old lad from the northeast, I signed on as a mess boy on the Southern Venture whale factory ship from the port of South Shields, my hometown. It was every young seaman's dream to become a whaler, where, in relative terms, a fortune could be earned on an 8-month expedition to the Antarctic. I was to complete 3 expeditions to the Antarctic, and the memories I carry from those 3 years still trouble me. I cannot forget, in the cold, inhospitable waters of the Southern Ocean, walking out on deck of the factory ship in the blackness and in the night shift, seeing and lit by floodlight and rigging lamps a 90-ton blue whale, its left flank of 9-inch thick white blubber being peeled away to expose 80 foot of scarlet flesh and weeping blood. Whalers with flensing knives in oilskins and leather thigh boots wading around amid screaming winches in 3 to 4 inches of warm, coagulating blood. On one occasion, cast aside, lying in its mother's blood, I saw a young whale fetus no more than 5 foot long, the umbilical cord still leaking life-giving fluids and blood. These memories should grow dimmer as I have got older, but somehow the reverse is true. The graphic pictures of what I saw have become more distinct, more horrific, and the guilt has deepened over the years. If you'll bear with me, just for a moment, I'd like to take some of your time to describe to you the hunting and killing of a blue whale. As the lookout on the catcher vessel 30 foot up the mast, my job was to sight the whale and give directions to the gunner as to where the whale was during the hunt and up to the moment of the kill. From the moment the whale is sighted, its mental processes must be tested and torn beyond description. Its acute hearing will have picked up the whine of the engines of the propeller of the catcher and its engines from far away as 3 to 4 miles, and it starts to dive and flee. But the whale's pace cannot match its hunter, and gradually the catcher draws in within shooting distance. Her only option now to evade this terrifying noise in her ears is to dive. She dives deep and stays there. The noise above her ceases. The gunner waits. He has plenty of time and patience. She changes direction underwater. The noise above her recommences. The ship's basic sonar has her position. She surfaces 200 meters ahead. The gunner brings the catcher about. She is now dead ahead and swimming furiously, her flukes raising mountains of spume, 30 foot high, I can now see her below, and can also see her red excreta streaming behind her, colouring her wig a deep orange. She is petrified and defecating with fear. 70 metres, the gunner is shouting instructions. Degree to port, degree to starboard, hold it. More speed, he barks, 50 metres. The gun, on a head trigger balance, is sighted on the huge grey-black mountain of blubber, rising and falling ahead, while her tail flukes thresh the water in more and more panic. The bang of the gun shatters the quiet of the early morning. The 150-pound solid steel harpoon snakes off across the white, turbulent water with metre after metre of sizzling, red-hot nylon rope following it. The harpoon buries itself deep into the back of the whale's blubber. The catcher reduces speed to take the tension. The rope snaps taut, and her 90-ton weight reduces the rope to half its diameter. For a moment, the whale is quiet. Then slowly she disappears below the surface. The rope follows her metre after metre into the deep, then stops. Everywhere is still. Everything is deathly quiet. The sea is now flat calm. Ice floes nudge the hull. Suddenly the rope tightens. The catcher starts to move imperceptibly, slowly but sure, but the engines remain quiet. The whale is now pulling the 400-ton catcher from a harpoon buried in her flesh. After what seems an eternity of probably 20 minutes, half an hour, the thick black mountain once again rises from the sea. She is now threshing madly and blowing a mixture of vapour and blood through her blowhole. Slowly but surely she is reeled into the forward end of the catcher and the rope is cut. Alongside the catcher, she is now turning slowly onto her side, exposing the beautiful white-grey speckled fluted belly. Still slapping the calm sea with her tail flukes, she lies mortally wounded deep in the middle of her own scarlet sea. She is dispassionately flagged with a 14-foot pole and left completely alone, her eyes glazed, following the catcher into the distance. It could take up to 8 hours to finally die. She will be collected within 24 hours by a corvette, which will transport her to the whale factory ship. These corvettes, collection ships, would sometimes have between 5 and 6 dead whales on either side of the hull on their return to the factory ship. On the subject of harpoons, I think it's worth mentioning the statistics of the time. Made out of a solid steel bar, they were approximately 4 foot by 4 inches in diameter and weighed in at perhaps 150 pounds. The harpoons, when extracted from the whale once it was dragged onto the deck of the factory ship, had to be returned to the blacksmith shop for restraightening and renovation. Some of them twisted and bent as one would twist and bend a paperclip. And what was I paid for my endeavours? In my first year, I received £85 clear. In my second season, I earned £125, and on my third trip, I earned £324. A fortune in those days to a young lad from the northeast. To put it into perspective, when I was paid off on my third trip, my grandmother advised me not to waste my money on wine, women and song like I had previously done, but to make my way down to the nearest estate agent and purchase for cash 3 terraced houses. And remember, I was the lowest paid seaman on board. I didn't realise it at the time, but it was pure, unadulterated blood money. Naively, I thought whale hunting was consigned to history. I'd followed Greenpeace's actions over the years and couldn't believe it. well, I learned that the issue of restarting large-scale commercial whaling was on the cards again. It had been banned under the whaling moratorium of 1986, and here we were again, looking at resuming the conditions that brought about the depletion in the first place. That's why I took the steps of contacting Greenpeace and offering help in their anti-whale hunting message. During my time on the whalers, I had no conscience about what I was doing, but now my sentiments changed completely. And I now consider myself a full-blown member of the anti-whale hunting movement, and as an ex-whaler, I am not alone in this conversion. Isawa Kondo, a Japanese ex-whaler of 50 years, has written his personal testimony and come out against whaling. The closing line of his book, The Rise and Fall of Japanese Coastal Whaling, are as follows. When I think about it, I feel that the whales were the most pitiable ones. Livestock are artificially bred and raised. And in a sort of exchange for that, they provide humans with food. Whales reproduce and grow by themselves without causing any bother to humans. But humans have selfishly massacred them repeatedly, year after year after year. And so I give my prayers for the repose of the whales' souls and hope that my writing can do even a little bit to preserve the record of their past. Mr. Kondo's book goes on, in part, to the heart of the question around the cultural aspects of whaling that the Japanese governments are working so hard to defend. What I came to understand is that in the not-so-distant past, I was part of a cultural heritage in the northeast of England linked to whaling that was going back to 1749. And I did break at this point, ladies and gentlemen, to point out that a lot of my details and information came from this very, very good book by Tom Barrow, The Whaling Trade in the Northeast of England, which in fact went from 1750 to 1850. I knew nothing about it as a whaler, but it proves the point that whaling almost touches every part of England, unfortunately, in the past. When I went whaling, it was part of the tradition stretching back almost 200 years, during which time the northeast prospered from the profits of whaling, which provided extensive employment based on whale oils and borne in industries such as varied as mining, tanning, cloth making, metalwork, soap manufacture, saddlers, haberdashers and watchmaking. And when whaling ended, we adapted. We did without. Nowadays, nobody can imagine whaling coming back. And what about the loss of identity associated with the end of whaling regionally? Anyone here in the UK will tell you that the North East is far from losing its cultural identity. But hard as it is to comprehend, there are nations such as Japan, Iceland and Norway, which in this 21st century persist in defending their cultural and commercial right to hunt whale. It was my privilege to travel to Iceland at the invitation of the Rainbow Warrior in 2003. Our message was clear. Commercial whaling is unacceptable and Iceland should stop. I was spending time with Greenpeace and at a later visit to Indonesia to live alongside subsistence whaling communities that led me to write a memoir of my experiences and which we have recently published. The title of this book sums up my own personal journey. Tara, Johnny boy, boy whaler to Rainbow Warrior. But there are some things that give us hope that times are changing. Firstly, we have the creation of whale sanctuaries. The Indian Ocean is one, and the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary is another. These initiatives are hugely important, as is the push for more marine protected areas. And more widely, Greenpeace are working with large number of scientists to help them pull together maps and information that make up the Energy Oceans Rescue Plan. Greenpeace says 40% of the world's oceans should become ocean sanctuaries. Currently, less than 1% of international waters are protected. This is not good enough. The threat to the whales and other sea creatures are as ominous as ever. As the oceans become even more degraded, it may be overfishing, chemical pollution or noise pollution, and one whale washed up off the Californian coast had 400 pounds of plastic garbage in her stomach. And then there is whale entanglement. Whales caught up by bycatcher fishing operations. This is now a new worldwide threat to whales. We may not hunt them, but we are trapping and killing them all the same. So spread the word. We need sanctuaries. And who knows, maybe even Japan will turn away from whaling one day. Since its creation in 1994, Japan has long argued that the establishment of the South Ocean Whale Sanctuary was in contravention of the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling. But on May 31st, 2010, the Australian government lodged formal proceedings against Japan in The Hague, Netherlands. The Australian public overwhelmingly supported the government's efforts to stop Japanese whaling, even at the risk of losing valuable trade relations. The court case was heard in June 2013. During the second week, Professor Lars Wallu of the University of Oslo and former Norwegian Commissioner to the Whaling Commission was presented by Japan as its sole expert witness. The Court of Justice hearing ended on July 16, 2013, and on March 31st, 2014, it ruled that Japan's whaling program was not for scientific purposes and ordered that Japan stop whale hunting. As Willie Mackenzie, one of the Greenpeace Rainbow Warriors crew that it was my honour to meet on the Iceland trip, said, "The myth that this hunt was in any way scientific can now be dismissed once and for all." Japan has since said it will abide by that decision. Maybe Kondo and myself may yet live to see whaling, once and for all, consigned to the history books. Finally, I would now like to read you a poem. I've written poetry for many years, and in this particular one was a way to express my hopes and anticipation that one day all Wales will have every sea and every ocean as a sanctuary in which to be free to roam at will and without hindrance or fear. Song of the Whale. I roam my seas and sing my talk to meet you at the Marianas or Cape Horn. I wallow in ice to cool my ardoured blood when every moon day month I hear your call across 1,000 miles of liquid speech. To your sweet booms and clickety-clicks, you suddenly have changed your mind, so I too must change my course. But be aware the barbs and ropes en route in deeps below a rising sun. For remember the death days of the past, so we can sing once more in southern seas, together under creaking bergs and winter freeze. Thank you.